it was hard because as she got closer and closer to the faith, it was farther and farther away from the world. Set up, all right, it's time for confession, and everybody stood up and they did a general confession. I'm like, okay, that's not good enough.
I was given the opportunity, a chance of a lifetime, to go over to Europe. And, oh no, you're going to become an atheist, is what she said to me. I was a server girl.
I've been given the grace to now I can be Catholic the whole way.
In the last decades, many Catholics have experienced terrible moral persecution. Their faith, their traditions were taken away from the churches. Many have lived for many years ignorant of the deprivation they suffered. Some are still going through that painful and at once beautiful process of rediscovering the Catholic faith. For the encouragement of those still in that journey, faithful Catholics have shared with us their challenges, trials, and blessings. This is the story of their journey back to the faith. Hello and welcome to the Catholic Wire and the Catholic Family Podcast. This is your host, Father Carlos Cepeda, and I'm joined today by Jennifer and Matthew in our new program for Back to the Faith. Jennifer and Matthew, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. As you know, this is a program where we speak about your story of how you came to the faith, and I heard the one that you did with Wendy, and I thought to myself, we have to have a video of that one.
Yes.
It was very, very good. So, but we've never heard your side of the story also, like, how did your family come to find the faith and tradition? So I think maybe we can begin with him, and then we can jump to the rest of the story.
Okay.
So I don't know, where did you grow up? How did your parents came to find the traditional Catholic?
Well, we were Novus Ordo, so Catholic going back, both on my mother and father, both grew up Novus Ordo Catholic, and went to Catholic high school, did all the Novus Ordo, and were completely involved in that. And then as things were going on, my mother and father were active in all the parish life and at the school and doing lots of things and always trying to live their faith. And then in doing so, they were trying to find more, and especially my mother. Mm-hmm. So she was they were instrumental in trying to get a perpetual adoration chapel started in the Novus Ordo, and looking to have a fuller faith, I guess. I never really, it's just from observing and living it, not having them or my mother tell me why or what was going on. But she had a journey that she was really looking for more and to be closer to God. And so they were instrumental in starting that and had to go through a lot just to get that started at the Novus Ordo. They were, no, we don't want to do that. We can't do that. And so they had to really push through to do those things. And I think that was the kind of the start of why is there resistance to doing things to become closer to God? And within that was the kind of the beginning of the journey of looking for more, reading more, talking to people more. And as my mom especially did that, then there would be, oh, there's this here. And there's this little kernel of truth or something to lead you on a journey somewhere. And so she would try to be more this way. And why is this happening? And why are you saying no to us doing these things? And so within that, she would get more books, get more traditional things, and she was always becoming more and more traditional and going back. And I don't know if it was part of her I think she liked the 50s when she grew up
Okay.
and went to Catholic school, and there was order and discipline, and
Yeah.
she loved the way it was before the changes, and she always would reference that, I remember. And so it was her journey of trying to kind of find that way back to that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard because as she got closer and closer to the faith, it was farther and farther away from the world and friends and family and all of it. My parents were pretty social, and whether it's playing cards with other Catholics or doing things within the church, and as you go along that path, they became persona non grata. Like, why are you doing this? Why are you going here? Why are you not wanting to do this? Why are you pulling away from the world and separating yourself? And so, so we went, and my mom, we got to a point where we just couldn't go to Mass anymore. That she would find things about the changes, and then we would talk about them, and she would discuss them with the family. And we were late getting into doing the family rosary.
I have to ask, how old were you when she was at the process of discovering maybe there's something about the Latin Mass and all that stuff? How old were you?
So I was grown basically at that point. So it was around the time that I had graduated high school. So it was into that time frame. So in my early 20s when it was happening. So then my brother, it was happening for him right as he was graduating high school. That was kind of the start of it. And then my sister was a couple years behind that. So she was just entering high school. And so we were kind of going through all that. And so I got to a point where I was, in my mid 20s, and my brother and sister were graduated. And then that's kind of when everything completely flipped, and we decided that we can't go to Mass anymore, can't be a part of it. And, at that time in the 90s, the internet was, in its infancy. And so you could find things, but it was hard to get as much information as you can gather now. So we had tapes, cassette tapes to listen to, and to get the Mass. And I think it was Father Altenbach in Minnesota that he had the Latin Mass and didn't go along with it. So we would stay at home and listen to his tapes. And when my mom and I didn't know if I was like, what's going on here? There were things that we'd go to. I remember going to it's Lent. I got to get to Ash Wednesday Mass it was Good Friday, and Easter was coming, and I hadn't been in confession. And so I went to in our city, there were 3 parishes, or 3 or 4. And one was really liberal and didn't have kneeler, or I don't know. It was not a traditional church, and it was not one that we ever went to unless we had to, because it worked out for timing or something like that. But so they had the last Good Friday or Holy Thursday that I could get to. And I remember going there wanting to go to confession, and set up, all right, it's time for confession. And everybody stood up and they did a general confession. And I'm like, okay, that's not good enough. I need to go. And so then I wasn't able to go. And that was something that was shocking. I remember being in the choir loft for a Mass, and they were bringing giving communion up there, as they do in the Novus Ordo everywhere, and you have your, and they dropped the communion host, and I was like, okay, that's not good. And they just went along, picked it up, went along, didn't do anything, didn't cordon everything off, didn't clean anything up. And so, when those, and then there was another time where it was either Holy Thursday or Good Friday, and said, please leave quietly. People are praying. And it was so loud. And I said, okay, I can't do this anymore. So I got up and I went to the altar and went back into the sacristy and talked to the father. And he said, people are social. What are you going to do? Like, you just tell them to be quiet. And he wouldn't do anything. And so all those little things that were happening were working on me. There were other times when we were leaving and my brother was kind of going through some stuff, and there was a priest that very liberal and telling people, it was okay to basically do whatever. And as you do or things as you're in your journey, you're still doing things with the world. And I went to this music concert, and at the time I was coaching 7th and 8th graders in basketball at my former high school and things. And I look around, and it's an adult performance. It's not meant for children and not meant for anybody really. But at the time I was there, so fortunately. But I'm there as I don't know when I was 28-year-old or something like that. I'm not sure, but 25, and there's 7th and 8th graders at this show. And I go, what are you doing here? Why are you here on this? Oh, Father bought the tickets for us. And I was like,
Wow.
That's so unacceptable. And, so then I didn't enjoy being there. Not that I should have anyway, but to have, things for minors that I'm doing and stuff. So those are the things that were working on me on the outside while my mom was working on the inside and working with our family and doing things. And it just got to the point where she met some people and some friends who really helped her. And we just became, stay at home and, reading the different things that you could get at the time, whether it was Hutton Gibson or different things about the changes, and it was bad to do. And Mom tried to talk to us, and, at first I was, you're wrong, this can't be. And
That's why I was asking about the age, because I know, there's different stages where you can find out, but if you find out when your children are grown, that is very, very hard.
yes,
Because, they say, well, we've been going here all our lives and you never said anything, and all of a sudden everything changes. It's very hard to take. So that's why I was very interested in that part of the process, because it must have been hard for her and for you guys.
yes, yes. It was difficult. It was hard for our immediate family. It was hard for the extended family. They didn't understand what we were doing. It was extremely difficult for my brother, and he's stayed Novus Ordo. It was difficult for me. The arguments that were made, I'm probably a contrarian. So when somebody says something, I will argue back. By the grace of God, it made sense. And so then I would come back and talk to my mom again, and it would, instead of being the argument and trying to win, it would be, oh, okay, I understand that. That makes sense what they were doing and things. And I would read some things, and when people give you things to read, if you don't believe them, you don't really want to read.
Yeah.
So it's not, I don't know how. Grace is an amazing thing, because I don't understand how else it could have happened. And my sister was more open to it, and she converted as well, and it was always a struggle for my brother. I don't know if he was very social. I don't know exactly what happened, but we had to talk about it, and he came to me, and we sat down together, and I think he was thinking that I would say, how as a child with your parents, sometimes you look at them and say, I know more than they do. I'm smarter than them. You didn't know whether you have your proper respect or what it might be. But we sat down and had a long talk about everything, and kind of like we're doing now, like, what's going on with Mom? Why is she doing this? What's going on? What do you think? And I was trying to show him the process and that it was true, because I was on my mom's side. I saw it at that point and agreed that we can't stay here. Nothing makes sense. It's not Catholic at all. If you do anything, if you look at any catechism or you do it and how anybody's living their lives and doing it, it's, it's just not. And so it was a conversation that was, I thought, good. But then now looking back at it, and I'm not sure if I saw it, and at the end it was just kind of, he was like, okay. And then it was, I don't know if that was his moment of like, I think I'm alone and I can't do what they're doing, and he never has able to get past it or to do anything. And so it's been a difficult journey with him, and having one person completely outside the faith, and you love them, and especially for the parents who do. And then it's easier for, I think, brothers and sisters to not get along than for a parent to,
That's true. Yeah.
It's in a weird way your blood, but you're like, okay, if you're going to do that, everybody kind of lives their own lives, and there's not that same connection as a father. And now that I know that too, a mother and a father having children, having that. And so.
And something I've noticed, and you might correct me in this if I'm wrong, but something I've noticed is a lot of times the main obstacle is that part, the social part. Mm-hmm. Because it's not just giving, if it was just choosing where you're going to go to church, a lot of people will be able to just make the decision. But the thing is, because we are our position is so ostracized and demonized, you could say, I hate to use that word, giving up your social life is giving up all your social circles and all that stuff. And that's what actually stops people. And it's interesting because you see how the devil works there. Because they don't ostracize Lutherans, they don't ostracise Calvinists. I mean, you could go, and if I could go to a Novus Ordo church and say, I'm a Lutheran, I want to have a service here. They'll say, oh, sure, just come at a time when no one else is going to see you.
Yeah.
But if I go and say I want to say the Latin Masses, forget about it. No, not even if you come alone and the door's closed, forget about that. At what moment do you guys discover the position that we hold right now, that the Holy See is vacant?
I mean, I don't know if there was a true moment. It was, okay, we're staying home. We found some tapes to listen to. Where can we go get the sacraments? So there was an older priest, and I cannot remember his name now. And so we would go to a hotel, travel to, an hour away to have Mass. There was another place a couple hours away. I think it was, I don't remember which society. And it was in the basement of another place. And then there was another one where we would travel to, I don't know, like 8 hours to do a weekend to get a Mass. Mm-hmm. And in doing all those things, it seemed like, okay, they said something about the Pope when they said the Mass. And so I don't know if we can continue to go this one and trying to figure out what it was. And you're, to your point, you're so separated. There's no one to confide in or to speak to about, okay, where am I going? And so, especially for my mom, it was just her on her own, listening to things and then figuring it out. And it became, it really bothered her that she was making so many mistakes along the way. She was still pushing to get that journey and to do that and going through it all. And, no more cards with anyone. Nobody was friends with, there was no social life anymore for, very few people would continue to do some social stuff with my parents. And, my mom, and when you first find it, you kind of want to talk about it and you want to help other people. Like, no, this is what's going on. And it's actually pretty off-putting if they're not open to it. Yeah. Unfortunately, and you're so excited, you don't see that as much. And so we didn't know what to do with almost anything, and you're out there, and it just got to a point where my mom was, well, we'll just stay at home. We'll listen to the mass and we'll follow along and we'll read and we'll do all those things. And so that was, right up to around 2000. And then the big thing that happened was we fully committed basically at that point as a family. And when you don't know what is acceptable or not acceptable, at least for us, we were erring on the side of caution.
Okay.
So my grandfather died, my dad's father died, and we didn't go into the church for the funeral service because we thought you can't pray with heretics or with another faith, and you can't be in there praying and doing it. So didn't understand that would be something that would be allowable to pay respects and to pray for the dead and to go there, and you're not participating in the mass. We thought even just going inside, being there, constituted participation. So it wasn't something that we fully understood and grasped. So that no longer, persona non grata with my dad's family then, because you weren't in for the funeral, we were there, and then visitation, and then we waited outside and said prayers for my grandfather, and that really, really bothered my brother, and he couldn't grasp it and did not like that at all. And then we went to the reception, and nobody knew we were going to do that, and it was, so that was kind of ruined the family dynamic there for that. And
that's another very interesting point, which is also very frequent, that a lot of times, and I say this many times in the sermons, not many times, but sometimes, that it's kind of like we are in a battleground, as Catholics, because there is some moral persecution, you could really say. And because of that, we're a little bit jaded. And it's what you just said, we err in the side of caution, on the side of being a little bit aggressive. I was saying in the sermon that people might ask you, what's your denomination? Traditional Catholic, you raise up your rifle. And on the one side, it's important for people to know that can happen, but also for the other side, for people to know, okay, this is why it's happening, right? I mean, they have gone through a lot of things, and it's not that they're judgmental, it's not that they're, rigorists or whatever, is that they're trying to figure out where to go, and a lot of times you're lacking that guidance. But most of the times, if you actually approach the person and you try to put the passions down and talk about it, it can come to a conclusion. Especially, that's one good point that you brought up. It's very important to have the guidance of someone, and hopefully we can have that available more in the future for people.
Yeah, it was difficult and awkward, and you didn't, it was good because we were all together. And so we had the courage and strength to go ahead and do it. It was, I think, it was wrong, but I think the courage to do something that might put you on the out and to take that on was good. It was good for me to learn, what can you do? What do you need to do? What is the, is it God first or not? And, it's not, there's compassion in doing things for others and trying to work that out, but it has to be God first versus someone else's feelings or whatever it might be. You take those things into consideration, but that's where we were at that point without any guidance on what to do. And I mean, I understood, and I don't think in the moment we were wrong doing that, because it was the moment. It's what we knew. So do I wish that we could have and it would have done some things? Yeah, but I don't know. You can't.
You were acting according to your conscience.
Exactly. And so that's, I think that well-formed conscience was something that my parents had always installed within us. And I mean, I can think that that's one reason that you're here, that we're here, is that we can see that, and that we followed what our conscience and grace and God told us. And so, if it wasn't for that, we just like, oh, just go with the world or whatever. So that was important, and that was the break of everything, I think. And then my brother got married, and I told him I couldn't be his best man, because I knew that was actually participation for sure, within that. And then we didn't go to his, and we stayed outside for his. And that was obviously kind of the final straw for my brother. And I don't know if that's something that it'll take some good grace for him to ever forgive, I think.
Yeah. Something I was telling, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do it anyway. Just kidding. No, something I was telling, someone was approaching me about a topic like that, and I was telling them something a good way for them to understand it is to tell them, your own priest wouldn't allow me to be, right? Because it's not just me saying it, it's that we are in different churches, basically. So if your priest that is marrying you knows who I am and what I'm doing, well, for marriage it doesn't apply, but it would apply for other cases. In this case, it was baptism. And I was telling him, if your priest knows where I stand, that I don't believe that the changes are right in Vatican II and all that stuff, your priest would tell you not to pick me to be, this was baptism. So in marriage, again, it doesn't apply necessarily, but it's kind of like, to me, that's very important to just emphasize and say, I'm not judging you. This is not about judging you. It's just, it doesn't work. The rules are like that, and I can't do it. We're judging the church that has those changes. Now, we'll pause there and move to your story. So how do you grow up, and then maybe you can tell us about how you guys meet and all that stuff.
Okay. So I grew up in the Novus Ordo as well. And so small town Iowa, and grew up on a farm. And so I didn't see a lot of the things Matt got to see in his church that he would tell me about, or excuse me, later on when I would see things on the internet, it was nothing like I had grown up with, these clown acts and such, and all the socialness of the mass that they brought in. But it was changed, obviously. And it wasn't really until I had met Matt, he was the reason why I changed. So my parents are still Novus Ordo, and all my family has been Catholic growing up, and devout Catholics. My grandmother was a very devout Catholic, still within the Novus Ordo. I think she went along with the changes, but I wonder sometimes if she questioned them. She would daily say her rosary, and I have actually many of her rosaries and things in my own possession now. And she was a very lovely lady, so she was a wonderful example, I think, in that for myself later on after I met Matt. And but otherwise, then I didn't have that family thing for him like he did. So the impetus for me was just him. So we met when I was already in college. And so I was a regular Catholic, though I would go to Sunday Mass. And though it's horrendous to think about it now, I was a server girl. So, I did. That was something that I did as well, which is horrendous as myself thinking about that now. But I guess I say that only to explain that I did what I could in terms of trying to be faithful. And in college too, I would go to Mass. So that was kind of a weird thing, but I always felt like if I didn't, I would have a really bad week. So again, maybe the grace of God, right? Mm-hmm. So I met Matt after I'd already graduated, and I was in undergrad, and I graduated. I had about 8 months before I was going to take a position teaching and dancing in Kansas City. So I went to school for my Bachelor of Fine Arts. And so I was working at a restaurant, Lone Star Steakhouse and Saloon. Lovely. And good food, but, and I grew up in the restaurant business, so that was an easy way. And I mean, Matt was working in a restaurant business as well, and he came in and we hit it off. So and then as we were starting to date and to talk with one another about things, then it became clear that he was different than I was in terms of the faith. And so it became a pretty early discussion for both of us that he was a traditionalist and that's how he wanted to stay. And I was a Novus Ordo, all my family was, and I knew nothing about any of that. So
And we had some good long conversations about it.
So before we really pursued anything, becoming as, to date, to become married, and to pursue, that kind of a serious relationship, we had a conversation and we discussed, and especially on Matt's end, he said, this is where I stand in it. If you don't want to go this way with me, then we'll have to part ways. And then, and I was tentative at first because, again, you see all I could see already what would happen. I could see that. I knew it was going to be a hard road, but I felt it was the right one, so we began.
There is that side of the story which you talked about with Wendy that I think is really interesting, and I relate a lot with it because what you used to do, the dancing and all that stuff. I relate with it because before I became a Carmelite monk, I wanted to get into music, and I got into the business a little bit. Well, I'm going to say I got into the business, but I started kind of going into that, and arts are very, very beautiful, but unfortunately, right now is just basically selling your soul. At least the experience I had from it. I remember I went to an audition, and we'll cut this part from the video. Just kidding. No, but I was I must have been 18, 19 years old, and I went to audition for music for bands, and there was a long line of people. There must have been at least 500 people in there or something. And as I was talking, I spent there probably a couple hours, and I was talking to the people in the line, and it just dawned on me, none of these people have any dignity. Mm-hmm. They're very willing to just sell themselves in any possible way. It's like they're a product, and that's what they sell, the product that they are. Yeah. And I just didn't feel like that. I was like, so... It was literally like I knew that these people would do anything to get the place, so to speak. And it started dawning on me, and there was that conflict in my soul too of saying, okay, this is what I want to do. It's very attractive, but I don't think I'm going to go to heaven this way. And I remember when I had to take the decision, it's a little bit of that ripping apart of the world on the one side and grace. So... what was your experience in that sense? How?
Yeah, for sure. I was just thinking when you were saying that, that's actually one of the things my grandmother said when I was going to go to school to the University of Iowa, because it was a liberal arts college. Okay. And it was liberal, and that's where he grew up, Iowa City. That she said, "Oh no, you're going to become an atheist," is what she said to me. So I do remember that. So yes, I was the outsider, even though I was inside the group. So I felt completely different from everyone else. I felt just like you were saying. I was the only one that would go to Mass. I didn't know anyone else really that was Catholic that went to weekly Mass or did anything. And so involving any of the feasts and Lent or Easter, or, so you would see the people with ashes maybe on their forehead, but they would just rub them off, or I don't know, during school in college years.
Was it theater, dance?
So it was dance.
Just dance?
Just dance. So yeah.
Wow.
So performing was what I did. So I did a lot of that. And so again, I would speak to your terms that definitely I was constantly around people that would just sell their soul to do whatever. Had a very poor choice of life.
And I don't say that, we don't mean to say that in a way of
judging the people, but it's just like they never grew up with that.
To on the opposite flip side of that, those people were very, very, I was friends with them. And so I just mean that they had a mixed life in that way, that I really enjoyed them when we would do things to create art and to do performances. But I would see the flip side of that once we weren't creating art in the outside. And then I was very different from them. And so it was, and luckily within the school atmosphere, there was not really as much of that evil and sell your soul kind of thing. It wasn't really until I came more out of school that it was still a little more family-oriented productions and things like that. It wasn't until later on that once I was out of college, that was more then that became more apparent to me. And I didn't always know for sure it was that, I was Catholic and from a small farm, small town. So I always felt that oddity about myself, if you will. And that was one of the things that I told Wendy in our previous interview, that was one of the deciding factors to really push me to be a traditional Catholic all the way and never look back, because I didn't think I could. At that moment, I had to break from my art in order to figure out myself and then figure out how I could still do art that was Catholic. So, So I had to make that break.
Were you ever in that moment where you just kind of realized, okay, I was in a moment like that where I had to say to myself, okay, this is it. Like, if I want to save my soul, I have to move this way. Were you ever like in a specific moment where you kind of weighed both sides and realized this is my soul or this lifestyle or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I did. That was the moment I was talking about with Wendy, that I was given the opportunity, a chance of a lifetime job to go over to Europe and perform with a famous world company that would travel all over. I had earned a position. I did one of my auditions, and I got the job. And I had flown out there even to audition, and I was in the airport to leave because I just, again, a poor art, someone in the arts, you don't always have a lot of flexible, funds in your pocket. So I was staying just for the day and night. And so I came the night before and did the audition, and then I was leaving that afternoon. So I didn't know if I'd made it or not. And they called my phone and my cell phone, because cell phones were there at that time, and when I was in the airport, and they told me I had the job. And what I didn't realize with the company is that they wanted to have lots of immodest dressed, pretty much next to nothing clothing. So that was like an alarm going off in my head, and I thought, wow, that wasn't what I was expecting with fame. I wasn't expecting that. I called Matt.
You were dating at the time, I
Yeah,
suppose?
so that was when we were dating, and actually, I think we were even maybe engaged at that point, or just recently engaged. It was right before we got engaged.
Right before.
Yeah, so it was that early. Yep. Okay. So I called him.
It took us forever to get engaged.
You're saying it.
But anyway, go ahead.
So anyways, so then I had called him because at this point, since we'd already made that decision, he was kind of my only person to consult, essentially, with knowing what he knows about me, my background, and then also knowing about where that I didn't really have any family or anyone to consult to ask for kind of a level balance of what I should do. And I called him, I said, I got the job, and he was excited for me because he's always been a great supporter of the arts. I mean, so he always enjoyed that I was involved in them. And when he asked, I said, well, I got it. And he said, oh, great. And then I told him, and then I told him the rest of the deal. And he said, well, it's up to you. It's your decision. I can't make the decision for you. And he said, it's.
I remember though, like when you told me, I don't know if it's good or bad. It's probably bad that in my head, I was trying to also find a way for you to be able to do it. And you know how you do that, and you make your compromises or your rationalizations. Because I remember saying, well, there's nudity in art, and I don't know where that line is for, if you Adam and Eve and the different things. As I've been to the Vatican there and stuff, and there's some nude pictures and
Yes.
different things. So I didn't know, and kind of out loud working out like maybe it's that way that you do, and then throughout the discussion,
Yeah.
with the way she was talking and she knew the truth in her heart, and I did too, and then I think that's
Yeah. I think it was that want to make it work. It was like you said, it was that point because it was my life dream is what I worked up to, and I was given it, but with this in hand with it. So it was hard. Yeah. So I did, and I said no. So worked that out with him, and I called him back, and I said, I regret. I said I will not be able to take the position. So I gave it up.
It just reminds me. I can figure the reaction because when I had to leave my job, and it wasn't the same, but I had to leave my job in IBM to go to the monastery, and they had a meeting like the next day, and they said like, "There's these crazy people that are coming here for like a month of training, and then they leave and, and this and that." So probably the guy hung up, and he was like, "What's with these crazy people?
you become yeah.
Wasting our time in the auditions." Well, it's a beautiful thing to hear, and it goes to show how important it is to have that compatibility when you're dating, morally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it had been only you,
Yeah.
who knows, you might have gone for it. I mean, I'm not saying you might have, but
I'm sure.
definitely like the strength of two works in that sense to fortify each other, right? So
Right.
it's a very beautiful thing. I'd like to ask you, we'll go into the arts again, but what is your life like right now as a Catholic? If you could describe it, like what blessings do you have? What are the chores? What things do you have around your life right now as a Catholic? If you could.
It's just coming from someone who was, so you two had to make a quick decision in a way of, okay, I'm giving this up. And I've lived the hypocrisy, 1 foot in the world, 1 foot being Catholic, going to Sunday Mass as a Novus Ordo, or knowing that I'm doing this and I know it's a sin and I shouldn't do it, and that the conscience was always there, but knowing the right from wrong and doing those things. And it was interesting because when you said that together, that was the moment that, okay, it's like when you work out with someone, you can talk to someone, you can, have someone there with you to go where you need to go and do what you need to do. And that's been with Jen. And so now, okay, I've been given the grace to now I can be Catholic the whole way and not be back and forth in the world, and I can just do it. I was, more so the Catholic way, but, there was always that pull. And now I've got someone to be unified with, and we can do what we do, and we don't have to worry about anyone else because we have each other. And then we can find our journey to God and to heaven and help each other get there. And that's been the biggest blessing and grace for me is that, by the grace of God, I met Jen, and we got married, and then that's been what's been my biggest blessing is like, okay, there's hope for me to get to heaven. I can get there with someone, and just seeing the process and the growth of, you always hope you're better, today than you were yesterday. And I think both of us going along that learning how to be good, how to get closer to God, and I'd say much more prayers. And we started by saying night and morning prayers together, which I didn't always do before we got married, and following through and just having that unity of the faith and God. And since living in the world, and it was hard to find anyone that was like you, to do that, that's been the biggest blessing. And then as we've been married, just continuing to, and especially driven by Jen, to make the home Catholic and a good Catholic home, and how to make our lives revolve around being Catholic and making the decision. We knew it was going to be hard. We didn't have a church when we got married. We had to go and get married in a barn.
But it was a German house barn.
House barn. It was
very lovely.
very nice. Father Gregory and the sisters made it look really, and your parents and everyone made it look really nice, and it was wonderful.
Manning, Iowa. So
Manning,
that's
Iowa.
a German town, and they have a authentic from Germany German house barn there.
Yeah.
So it was,
Since there was to what you said before, no one would let us. We thought, we can go to a church, and that Father Greg's like, they're
again,
not going to
close
let
to
you.
my close to my hometown
Yeah.
area. Enough that since usually you go to where the female's family is, then that's exactly. There wasn't anything near the area except for Omaha.
So then and then the blessing of children and how it has changed me to not think about, I don't think about the world so much. Not that as opposed to, okay, it's my family. It's first it was how do we get each other to heaven. Now I've got also a responsibility to set an example for my children, to help them get to heaven. And it's been a huge blessing for me to then grow spiritually by helping the children. And coming from a Novus Ordo, I knew things, but learning the faith all over again through their eyes, and the joy, and finding that joy and that happiness in living the faith has been the most wonderful thing for us, and gives us, or at least for me, giving the strength to, okay, I can go to work and be in the world and do things, or whatever conflicts arise with that, or God will provide. Grace of God, we do what we have to do and be strong together. That has been, to me, the biggest grace. And then being able to together decide, all right, we're going to move to be here, and move here to be able to have the sacraments, have our children be able to take part in a daily and weekly and yearly, and live the faith, every day, rather than, okay, we got a plan, or we can go this Sunday. And I would say I would make compromises like, well, I'm going to be tired, we got to drive 3 or 4 hours and then back, and just to try and remove those obstacles that, as a man, I would put in my, the humanistic part of, I can, it's too far away. It's not required that we go every week, because it is difficult. But
that is such an important issue, and I know that not everyone can move. Not everybody has that chance, but I think it's so important for people to live close to the church. I just 2 days ago, that this last Saturday, the husband of one of my parishioners passed away, and it was, with the sorrow of his passing, obviously, but it was very nice that they were nearby, because I went there all day. I went in the morning, even the sacraments, came back, had Mass, then went back again, talked to him a little bit, then went back. And I was basically all day just going back and forth. And they called me, I don't know, 3 minutes. I got there like 3 minutes after when he passed, which is, still good enough, they say in theology, to think that the soul's still there. But I had been giving him the sacraments all day. So, which is, when you're agonizing, that's very nice, because, the person might, I don't know, fall into an impatient act or whatever. And so that was very nice. I think in itself, it is worth it, to move. And for you guys, for example, if you have kids and you have a school and all that stuff, how many kids do you have right now? 8 kids already? Wow, that's beautiful. Great.
And the thing too with moving here, and a couple things that you had both said earlier, is that the closeness of your family and being different, and is in a weird way a detriment, because I think because it's Catholic, Whereas someone who's not Catholic, sometimes, see what you've said is like, or your people at dance in the department, they're like, okay, do whatever. They don't care because it's not personal to them. But then it's personal for my relatives who are Catholic and your relatives who are Catholic, because then they say, well, you think I'm going to hell then? Mm-hmm. And it's more of a personal thing, and it's not it's like what you said. I could bring home someone who's Jewish and everybody like, oh, that's wonderful. We could get married. Like, that doesn't really make sense, but okay, it's fine, not a big deal. And none of it's a big deal until it's someone changing what your perception is of Catholicism. Mm-hmm. And then that's when it's personal, as opposed to the people who aren't Catholic or who are atheistic in a way. And then that's difficult for Jen or for me, because then you can get along with them in a worldly manner, because they don't look at you and say, oh, I don't want to be around him, and because you're not the same like as you were before, because you left the Novus Ordo. So that's why coming here then as well, to have that community and that like-minded people. Yeah. And then you can make friends, and you can have socializing and doing things with people who are edifying, and you're all trying to achieve
you don't have
the
to
same
forsake
goal.
your faith to live a life. So,
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so
You get a social circle back,
Yes.
which is very important too, to try to make that grow up.
Yeah. Especially for your children too, I think, especially. That's what I was going to add to what he said, that, when we were first married, living in Iowa City was still, that's where I went to school and got my master's and my Bachelor of Fine Arts. And so I still knew everyone there, and everyone wanted me to do things and teach in the departments. And it was, and he knew, he had his job, and everyone knew us, and a lot of people were Catholic again. And so it was hard to, you were by yourself, though you were with everyone. And so it wasn't it was more natural for us to want to move away then. I think it was hard. Mm-hmm. It was a hard choice, but it was a good choice, because we had made the choice, and that was what was really important for both of us, that we were on the same page before we got married. And so we wanted to continue. We decided to be traditional Catholic. And I think it made a big change for him too, like you were saying, with we were going to go and we were saying our prayers in the morning and evening, and we were going to go to Mass as often as we could and all that. And then suddenly that wasn't enough. Now we got to move there, because, we have a couple small little babies, and it's not enough. We have to live our faith like I told Wendy in our other interview that living your faith for your children is actually a great blessing. And so that I really wanted that, because I think what I gathered from my perspective in my family is people that got hardened off to the Catholic faith. A lot of people felt there was a sternness and a rigidity, to being a Catholic. And there's this, everyone is damned to go to hell, that it's not necessarily, there is no joy in being a true Catholic. And that is really too bad that most people think that, because there's so much joy that can be had from living your faith daily. And it's not all about saying it's someone's fault and they're bad. It's about learning to be better and do all for the glory of God. And it becomes so easy then. So then that is the blessing of that side. But with the flip side of giving up it all, then it turns out to be a grace and a blessing in disguise. So
Yeah, you don't mess it then.
Then you don't mess it. Yeah, you don't.
Everybody has their...
Yeah, you might look back, but you make the decision.
That's just the devil.
We were back, and we got rid of the TV. We got rid of all this stuff. All the things, and so
getting rid of TV is one of the big keys to happiness, I think.
we made that decision early on. We were like, get rid of the TV. And so it's funny, because then he's really my only outlook most of the time into the world. And so I do, but I'm so not in the world. I'm so back in the 1800s, no idea what's going on in the world. I kind of like it that way.
Yeah.
It is very nice. I must say, it is really nice.
For my own sanity as a melancholic, I like it.
I can relate. There's a few questions that I want to ask you, and some of them I think we've covered them, but just, we'll summarize it in there.
But the last, or one of the last ones, we're pretty good with time. How do you practice? How do you do the arts now? Now that you're a Catholic, what outlets do you have for that? That interest.
So yes, through my children mostly, for sure. So I homeschool, even though we have a great school there. We decided to homeschool. We were homeschooling before we left Iowa City because, of course, we wouldn't send our children to public school ever. No. But
child abuse.
Right, and so we made that decision to homeschool. So we kept with homeschooling, and so definitely through my children, I get to creatively, artistically lead them along, as well as I do teach them dance, tap, and more recently, I've started doing some more. So I've had boys, are my oldest. So I have a lot of boys we have boys in our family mostly, so not very many girls. So I haven't really done a whole lot of more of like ballet or something like that. But I think teaching movement is fun to many people, and we started having those. I told Wendy about those classes we're having for teaching dance. Social dance. That I love the folk dances and things. So now I've found a way through like Maria von Trapp's book that I can find a way to fit the arts into my Catholic world, that it's not necessarily all bad. I don't have to shove it all aside. That there's a lot of social dances and stuff that I can teach, and it makes it fun for many.
I'm just gonna say, when your boys grow up, if anybody watches this video, they're gonna be very, very popular. Everybody's gonna know that they dance.
Yes.
So you're like, oh, who's that lady again?
Oh yeah. So again, he appreciated the arts. So, but I did tell Wendy, I took a break from arts because I had to. I just had to cut it away so I could figure out myself, my soul, and who I was as a Catholic. So I could have that firm ground and then add it back in, because it had been so much part of me for so long, and that was my only goal. That I wasn't.
Foundation and that.
Yeah, I had to figure out how that could fit in. So, and it was great because then I had boys, so they weren't necessarily like, "Hey, Mom, can you teach me to dance?" So it was, but they like to do it. So, and so that's really my thing that I can do now with teaching adults. We started some classes to do the thing like Maria von Trapp did, the carnival, so that we get together and I can teach other couples how to social dance. Wendy was talking about, and I want to do some of that this year, is some contra dancing, which is more line dancing, so even like back to the 1800s and such.
Someone gave me an idea in the church, and I'll throw it out there right now, and I guess it's going to become public now. This video's come like 1 year later. They were saying that he was a Novus Ordo, and they had an event that he really liked, and I liked the idea a lot. He was saying that they had a father and daughter dance. And so they will have, that's when the daughters turn 15, 16, and they do an event where the father dances with the daughter. And it's kind of like, the purpose obviously is the bonding, but also to teach the daughter how a gentleman is supposed to act. So the whole thing is almost a date. He'll pick up the daughter and he'll bring her to the church, and then they did it in the church. And then in the basement, they'll do a whole gala. I think that's how you say it, gala.
Yes, that's correct.
And they do social dancing.
Yes.
But the whole thing is just the father kind of teaching the daughter how a gentleman acts. And so it was like, that's a brilliant idea. I really liked it. And he said that it was very nice. And the daughters also always remember that, fondly, like, the night that my dad danced with me. So there's an idea for you too.
Yeah, that's something that we have as we watch, and you see things and you learn, and as your children grow, there's a lot as you're younger and different things that are going on. And so as that transitional phase into adulthood and things that we've been talking, especially since our eldest is 16, and seeing other families and how everything is going, and how you bring for the young adult that type of
Environment that's
social
Catholic,
environment that is Catholic, and so we've
but still
you know,
fun. It doesn't have to be. It's not all strict
it's-
rigidity of nothing.
right,
But
and so that you can have a social and edifying experience, and it's not just go to a movie or you go out, within the secular
rest of the
world,
world, yeah.
and have to do that, and so that's the next thing that we've been talking about
yeah,
quite a
we're
bit.
interested in pursuing
Interested in
that stuff. So
pursuing
yeah.
that.
I'm thinking of that too. We'll have
Yeah.
to talk after the video's done. I just want to say this before we finish this part of the topic, but because dancing is something that kind of runs in Mexican families. I'm not going to say in my family only. It's like every person in Mexico dances, I think.
Just to get at a thing that one of my favorite good friend I had was a choreographer, and he was Brazilian, and so that's just part of the culture, and so it was great. I loved it. I mean, that's what many of the artists were like that, had that in their families that were from other countries. So
We're born dancing, probably.
yeah, exactly.
In my city, we have you probably know the folk dance in there is Jarabe Tapatio. And it's like the women they have like a long skirt all the way down to the
Oh, yeah.
here, but they go like this.
Yes, I know the
colors.
dance. Yeah.
And my sister would love that. She would love it, and she would do it in my house all the time. I'll cut this part of the video. But she would have me dance with her.
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
But what I want to mention is, I think it's very important when you're mentioning that arts are not incompatible with Catholicism, because arts are part of beauty and truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, the good, the true, and the beautiful. That's how
Yeah.
everything.
And dance in particular, I find a very good use to it when it's modest and proper. Also not only to manifest joy,
Yes.
but to avert sadness even.
Oh yes.
When a person is depressed, for example, girls, get depressed a lot, and teenagers. And if they know how to dance in a proper way, in a beautiful way, and that's a hobby that they can have safely,
Yes.
it's just little
Yes.
things like that, dance, music, any arts, even theater. Because, for example, in schools, how you see the plays in schools, and at first, well, obviously, they're not going to be like, the greatest actors in the world when they're teenagers, but some of them are pretty good.
Yeah.
But it's very useful. It's very, very useful because acting teaches you how to display yourself and how to portray emotions and use your emotions. So there's a lot of use to that. I want to ask you 3 questions before I'm done, and I'll ask them and then you can answer each. Most of them I think we've covered. The first one is, what is the greatest blessing that you can think of from all this process? Like, what is the thing that you're most thankful for? The second one would be, what is the greatest challenge that you had to go through this? And the third one would be, what words do you leave for the younger generations? Not just your children, but everyone who might be watching this and who will see this in the future. So I don't know who wants to go first. First, with the greatest blessing that you can think of.
I'll start. I think the greatest blessing, what I referenced before, was by Jen coming into my life, and then that has given me spiritually everything to find the joy to live the faith, and that acceptance and living the faith has been the best thing for me. So that it's who I am now instead of something I thought about or believe in, and it's becoming, and that what I believe. That's been my biggest grace, I think.
Well, I actually almost have to mimic him, because if I wouldn't have met him, I wouldn't have been a traditional Catholic. So I don't think I would have I don't know if I would have had that. So not knowing what it would have been, I will have to say that it's probably my choice as well, since that was just like a complete change, for me. And then also making the solidity to choose our family first and to be traditional Catholic, and to leave my arts to fulfill that on the side, like we were talking about, where there's a time to weep and a time to mourn and a time to dance, so that it's, it's not my whole life, that is not first, that's God first.
Yeah. How about the greatest challenge?
I think the greatest challenge is, and kind of the flip side of that, is that you're giving up things that the world and the devil has like up to Jesus, and you can have all this. You can do all this. Where they're, for our our restaurant, well, you could be open every day. You didn't have to take off Sundays or give up that stuff. You can have you can have more money. You can do this. You can, do whatever it might be within the world, and it's fine. And then along with that, the difficult of the family, and you don't have that anymore. So it's that worldly,
Extended
and then the struggle of then, okay, no, and within the grace of having each other, then the struggle is joyful, and it's not. You have some sorrow. You don't want to lose your family or lose your friends, but the joy in I'm doing the right thing. We're going to stay steadfast together, and then there's the joy in the suffering for the right reasons, and not just to suffer. And that, for me, that is.
Sure, for sure. Especially, probably the biggest thing for me being the outsider to my own family, my own parents, and my own siblings. That is probably the biggest challenge, and it helps you solidify what you really want on the other side of that. But that is a challenge, and it's a constant burden during any type of family get together. But I think it's something that they can slowly see as time wears on. It softens the edges of maybe personal blows to them and choices you make that are not personal, like we were talking about. It's more, I'm not just saying that I can't be there with you during something, but I won't partake it if it's against God and the being a Catholic, a true Catholic, a traditional Catholic. So that there's a separateness in that. And so that is a challenge. But it's worthwhile because it's what is best.
It's that want. There's all those wants that you have, and then when you're together, we can talk about them, whether it's the extracurriculars of the children with sports or movies or TV or doing all these different things, and you're like, oh, that'd be fun to maybe do something, but is it the right kind of fun? And we've had a discussion about one of them, like, well, we're struggling with this, and then when you have someone to talk to and play off of one another, then I know Jen said at one, like, but it's just a diversion. It's just for this. Then is it what we want to do? Is it worth it to do that? And then that helps you then to like, no, it's not. If it's a movie. It doesn't matter. It's not how I'm going to get to heaven. It's a trifle. It's nothing. We could read together or do something else together. Go play in a park that would provide a diversion and edifying one rather than just the worldly one. And that's been a constant struggle of figuring out what you can partake in and what good can come from it as you do some things, and then others where no, it's not worth it. We should not do that.
Mm-hmm. What about the last one? It would be, what words would you want to leave for the younger generation and yourself as well?
I think for the biggest thing, because every generation, like you said earlier, is different, where you have your struggle, then there's the different struggles that the new generation will have once you are children growing up within the faith. And as a father and parent, and as we've talked about, what do we do to make sure our children get to heaven and keep the faith and don't lose it? And the biggest single thing is that I want them to do, because if it's not their struggle, to fight the world for it, because we've become a community. And they don't have to have that as their struggle. Their struggle now needs to be finding the joy and be joyful in your faith and live your faith. You don't have to go out and look for a church to go to. Now you've got one. that you can go to daily. So embrace the graces that God has given you and live your life with that joy of, oh, God's given me this. What can I give back by participating in your salvation and to get to heaven? And
One thing we've talked about too is once you made the decision to pursue your faith first, that you really figure out what that means for the both of you. And I would even suggest it as someone growing up within the faith, that you make that decision for yourself, what that means for you before you even pursue anyone else in a relationship, to pursue marriage. And that you have to have that conversation with that person as soon as you almost meet them, that you meet them, you know you're compatible, then you go ahead and have that discussion right away. This is what I want, and this is what will happen, and this is what we need to do together in order to be traditional Catholics. And that you don't forget that in all the hullabaloo of wanting to get along and, get acquainted, and that stuff is not necessary until you know that you have that solidity in your relationship. And we did that, and so we were fortunate. We had the grace to do that. So I think that was a big stone for me to rely upon. I don't know if I would have felt, if it wouldn't have happened that way, I'm not sure I would have felt that I could do it. Or, I guess I wouldn't have that, at least that to fall back upon that. It was a rock for me. You need to have that solidity, that you know what you're going and you're stepping into, and the commitment of it, and that it's not something that's just based on emotions and something of the material world, that it's solidity with yourself, your husband or wife, and then God, and that comes first. And that's one of my suggestions to anyone, whether you do it the route we did, which is finding the faith at the same time, or that you're doing it in retrospect and already have the faith, that you really need to figure that out before you would begin to date someone. That has to be solidified. And then also, I would say, too, to live your faith. That is the biggest grace, I think, and I'll refer to the book again because I love Maria von Trapp. But I do love the Von Trapps, and I do love how they lived out their faith. I do love that. And I think that if you find a way to live your faith and find that joy, which I love the acronym again of Jesus, others, yourself. That's JOY.
Okay, nice.
So Jesus, others, yourself is what joy stands for. And so if you do that and you make everything cohesively into your life, it's not just sometimes, or maybe at Easter, or maybe one, it's, you learn about the saints, you read about the saints daily, you find ways to do things childlike, to make your children want to love the saints, to pursue the faith, and it just becomes so cohesive and intertwined with everything that I don't know how you could possibly want to leave it. So, yeah.
Because with that is just, man, the foundation is what I think the generation, but what everyone has done, and for the last, since the changes, and to get to where we are now. So that's laid a foundation, and now this generation build a cathedral, with the cathedral of a literal one, or bringing the joy, bringing the arts back into it, all with what you said, Jesus first, and the love, and build that continue to build on that foundation, and bring the beautiful art and music back to, and create with God's grace more things to honor God and to love God with that. Mm-hmm. So I think
community
that's build that community.
I do want to touch before we go, but I want to touch into that point because I found that to be very interesting in that process when I was also, finding out the true faith. Because you can live Catholic all your life and not live it. Mm-hmm. And when I really came to that, to actually saying, okay, I'm going to practice it all. I'm going to do it all. Because, I was in the world, as I was saying. And there was that moment where I said, okay, this is it. I'm gonna, everything is gonna go in. And you just realize it. To me, I would say it doesn't work. You don't taste it until you have it all. If you just do parts of it, it doesn't work. And there's a good analogy, and it's a bad analogy because I'm sure most people won't relate to it. But I don't know if you ever saw the movie. It was a movie called Contact. That is about the
Once,
A long time ago,
Yeah.
aliens come and they give like a message, and in the message they say, well, you build this spaceship and you build it like this, and then you'll be able to go to some planet. And in the plans it says it's a ball, and it says don't put anything in the ball. Just put the person in there, no chair, nothing. Just throw the person in the ball, and that's the ship. And the scientists are seeing the plans, and they go like, no, we gotta put the chair, we gotta put like, the seat belt and all that stuff. So they mess around with the plans. And then when they throw the ship, and this person, the astronaut, is in there, all the stuff that the scientists added, the ship is, vibrating like that. And so if they hadn't done anything, the astronaut would just be floating. But because they put all these chairs and everything is flying around and hitting the person. The point to be made is, because they didn't do it as it was planned, it becomes a whole mess. And it kind of goes for me to show like the faith, and I always tell this, and I told that to the boys, God planned this. It's like an engine. And so if you mess with it, if you leave a part out, it's not going to work. I mean, it might run and it might still take you there, but it's going to be violent. It's going to be like, if you do the whole thing, then it works. And it's painless, not painless. There might be pain, but it's easier.
Yes.
Yeah, the joy of the pain in a way. Like, okay, I can sacrifice this. And then it's a narrow path. But when you're doing it, when you're offering it up and doing it, the path doesn't seem so narrow. It's narrow when you look at the two choices. But if you give it up to God, then, well, you can't fall. You're going to win. God tells you, we can't lose.
Yeah.
St. Teresa of Avila would say, I don't know why you say this path is narrow. It's like a royal way for me. It's like a highway, she would say.
Yeah, I know, right?
Oh, really? I didn't know that. She said that. Okay.
Yes,
that,
that's exactly what she would. I was just going to add to that, saying that's exactly. It's because you get blinders. The road is gilded, and that's correct.
So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for. I always tell people I really appreciate it, because I know that video is different. Video is a little bit more of a sacrifice. It's less anonymous, you could say. So I appreciate it, but I really do hope that it does good. And especially, I'd like to do these things as a legacy, a legacy for your family, your grandchildren, who knows until when, this will be up there. If you allow me to release it once it's edited. But again, Jennifer and Matthew, thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Father Carlos Cepeda. This is another edition of Back to the Faith, and you're watching The Catholic Wire. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you for listening to The Catholic Wire. If you have found this show helpful, please say a prayer for all our collaborators. Don't forget to subscribe to our channels and share with your friends. For questions and comments, you may contact us at thecatholicwire.org.